Welcome to the LDN Radio Show, brought to you by the LDN Research Trust. I'm your host, Linda Elsiegood. I have an exciting lineup of guest speakers who are LDN experts in their field. We will be discussing low-dose naltrexone and its many uses in autoimmune diseases, cancers, etc. Thank you for joining us. Today I'd like to welcome our guest, Dr. Maria Torsiello, who is a pharmacist from Richmond in Virginia. Thank you for joining us today, Maria.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Linda, for having me.
So, can we find out who Maria is?
Yeah, so I am a pharmacist with RX Compounding Pharmacy in Richmond, Virginia. I graduated from Wilkes University from pharmacy school in 2020, so somewhat of a new graduate, but now in the compounding space. Yeah.
Okay. Did you always want to be a pharmacist? What was your goal when you were a little girl growing up?
Yeah, pharmacy definitely was in my mind as a little girl. I originally wanted to go into research and design, but I had been accepted to a pharmacy program, and then I realized I like what pharmacists do and don't want to go with more schooling route. So I just kind of decided during that point in pharmacy school that, I'm really happy if there's a really big impact I can do with the tools that I have and the patients that I see. So I kind of did know that I was always going to end up in some sort of pharmaceutical route from a young age. I always loved the science and yeah.
And it was always compounding that drew you?
Yeah, I would say so. I've always had a love for science and chemistry, so I really get to use that here. And then I also have a really strong passion for helping people. And with compounding, being able to do things either be off-label or making things a little bit even more effective and building upon what we currently have, it's really filling in that warm spot for my heart, being able to help people in unique ways.
Mm-hmm. So can you describe the pharmacy to me? What it's like, what you do, is it sterile?
Yeah.
Etc., etc.
Yeah, so here at RX3, there's actually two locations. One in Chester, they have the sterile compounding lab where they do make various eye drops, injections, bladder irrigations. They also do non-sterile compounding, which is like your hormone creams, your vet prescription suspensions. Here where I work out of our short pump location, we do just non-sterile. So we do, the vet prescriptions, hormones, various other creams and topicals, and of course, low-dose naltrexone. Yeah.
So your other facility, do they make LDN eye drops and nasal spray, that kind of thing?
I believe they have not as of yet.
Mm-hmm. And what forms do you compound LDN into?
We make mostly just capsules and liquids.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Don't you do any sublingual?
Nope, not at the moment. I mean, I suppose they could hold the medication in their mouth and make it become a sublingual administration, but we don't have any particular patient that, at least that I know of, that is taking it sublingually.
But if a patient came to you who's got, say, Crohn's or ulcerative colitis, and they couldn't absorb the LDN via the stomach, sublingual is a different route to take.
Yes.
You'd be able to do that for them?
Yes, of course. We would.
Yep. Mm-hmm. Yep. Good. So there we are. And what about children? Do you compound any LDN for, say, autistic children?
We have not. So also what I do here at RX3 is I do a lot of communications with providers. So we are trying to get to, pediatric physicians more and letting them know about LDN. But at this time, we haven't made it into a cream yet, but we definitely could. We have the right bases. We're ready to go. We just haven't had a prescription yet for it.
Okay. Yes. And hopefully we are having our
LDN 2025 conference next year in Portland in Oregon. It's a 3-day conference. We could give you the information that you could give to providers in your area who are maybe gastroenterologists who might be interested in the sublingual, and pediatric doctors. And if they book early, they'll get a discount. So, and CME credits. So a win-win.
That'd be wonderful. Yeah, I'm sure our providers would definitely love to see that, because I always direct them to the LDN Research Trust, because that's so much ample and great information. But I definitely think that they would appreciate possibly going to a conference and just being immersed and absorbing it.
Well, that's the thing. Dr. Sarah Zielsdorf, who's our medical director, absolutely loves the networking. I mean, she thoroughly enjoys the presentations, but it's talking to like-minded people and brainstorming, basically. You know, I've got a patient who wasn't doing very well. Oh, did you try, tweaking this and doing that? And it's really good. But if they can't make it in person, they can watch the live stream, and then they can watch it. You get the recording as well. So if you've only got time to watch one presentation here and there, it wouldn't matter. You could still get the credits as well. So that's pretty good. Mm-hmm. So what do you see next for your pharmacy?
I would say we are just plugging away and continuing with getting more and more providers interested. Our focus at the moment was speaking to providers about LDN and the use in cancer. We haven't heard back from the providers yet, but we pretty much are just trying to, there's so many different uses for it, so our next steps is just eventually, spreading that education and eventually being able to have those more in-depth conversations with providers.
Mm-hmm. I mean, even though the LDN Research Trust is 20 years old, this June just gone, there are still so many doctors that don't know about LDN. I mean, when the LDN Research Trust started 20 years ago, like yourself, it wouldn't have been on your radar because you wouldn't be in that position. So we need to keep making sure that the people that are coming along learn about LDN. You get one provider who sees many, many patients. The chances are probably 3/4 of those patients would be a candidate for LDN, whether it's mental health or chronic pain or an autoimmune disease. The list is endless, isn't it, where LDN could be a benefit. And I found that doctors who have that eureka moment with a patient that they didn't know what to do with, they've tried everything, add LDN to the mix and they're hooked. They are such a big believer and want to prescribe it more and more. So it's definitely education and getting the word out there. And I feel that it's the pharmacy that are driving that forward in the education, like you said, that you are contacting those providers, and that's what we need. Unfortunately, there is an awful lot of misinformation on the internet. It's not all factual, and we try very, very hard to make sure that everything we put on the website has been verified before it gets on there and that it is accurate and correct. Because even some of the trials that have been done, they've not started on a low enough dose. I mean, some of the trials start on 4.5, drop out really high, and then it doesn't do the trial any good at all. It can't be rushed. Some patients take longer than others to get to their optimal dose. What are you finding that the providers that you are working with, what sort of protocol do they normally recommend for their patients?
Yeah, so all the providers that I have a relationship with, I updated our prescription pad forms that we provide to them to be updated to the 2024 recommendations on the LDN Research Trust. So we have patients starting at 0.5 milligram, increasing by 0.5 milligram every 1 to 2 weeks. depending. So we have a really nice form. Actually, I'm really proud of it. The providers can circle whether they want a 7 or a 14-day titration for their patient. We find that it can be a little bit more cost effective too for patients to start on a oral liquid for at least the titrations and for adherence, not having to take so many capsules per day. And then once they find their dose, we can switch them to a capsule if that's their preference. So we give the providers a checkbox as well to be able to select that at patient preference, and we would just do the equivalent dosing. So yeah, and if I see a LDN form come through and it's just a patient starting at 4.5, it's kind of like, okay, hold on. Have you took LDN before? I just kind of explain the whole process. I just kind of start them off. Then I normally call the provider, and that's also how I form new relationships. That just happened, earlier this week. A doctor was really, really grateful for finding out our form and really happy, and we were able to start the patient low and hopefully now start her working back up.
Mm-hmm. Do you do like prescriber evenings in your pharmacy? Do you invite them for a presentation on LDN, or isn't that something you've done yet?
Yeah, we have not done that yet. Our pharmacy, our location is a little bit awkward for seating arrangement. Our Chester pharmacy would be a little bit better for that, but we have not done that yet. That would be a good idea, though.
Well, other pharmacies, I think, have found that to be very beneficial.
Okay.
Some of them do it monthly, the first Thursday of the month or whatever. And it seems a very good way of educating several people together. And like I said, they do like talking to each other, networking. So it's an effort to do it, but the benefits are great, I think. So yeah.
I like that idea. I think we should do that for sure.
Good. And will we be seeing you at the LDN 2025 conference?
I'm hoping so. I really am hoping so. I can't fully say for sure, but I definitely really want to make it work if I can.
How many pharmacists do you have in your pharmacy?
In my location, we have 2 full-time, 1 part-time. And in the Chester location, there is, I believe, 3 full-time, maybe a part-timer.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So
it's a good bit of us, about 5, 6.
So what is your area? Just the state of Virginia?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. You can't ship out of state.
Our Chester pharmacy, they do have a pharmacist license, I believe in Florida, but our Insure Pump are only licensed here in Virginia.
Mm-hmm. That's good. So can you give us an example of a patient that you have on LDN?
Yeah, so we did have this one patient that has been titrated up in LDN. They found their target dose to be about 2.5 milligrams. And the unique thing that they had told me was that they normally would get a really severe asthma attack whenever they had a cold, whether that be, pretty much anything. But they had said that they recently had COVID not too long ago, and surprisingly, no asthma attack. So they were very pleasantly surprised, like, almost like a shock, like, where is it, And I said, well, that very well may be because of the LDN. They had been on it for, I think at that time it was maybe 6 to 8 months, so it's definitely a good little bit. And they were really present and happy. So that's something really resonated with me. That's like a really unique little tidbit because as we know, it can be used for asthma as well. They were using it for something different, more pain condition, but that was a little happy bonus.
Well, that's it. If you have an autoimmune disease, doesn't mean to say you can't have a second or even third autoimmune disease. You're more susceptible to having autoimmune diseases if you've already got one.
Yeah.
So it's not a case of blaming everything on the condition, the main condition, because there might be other complex conditions that go along with that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So do you have any other stories to share?
The other stories that so I would say a lot of our patients are still in the newer stages of starting it, at least the ones that I've personally been in communications with. I have one patient who gave me an update that her sciatic pain, they weren't exactly sure what the cause, whether it was a pinched nerve or something, but she was having a lot of sciatic pain running down her legs, and upon starting it, that did significantly decrease, where she is, able to enjoy a much larger part of her life. But I don't have too many other complete stories.
Mm-hmm. I had a lady I interviewed once, and she'd got osteoarthritis in her coccyx. So sitting down was painful, standing was painful, walking was painful. And she was going to tell me her LDN story. And this was before we knew that LDN actually did work on chronic pain. It didn't have to be an autoimmune disease, because, of course, rheumatoid arthritis is, but osteo isn't. So I was listening to this lady's story and I'm thinking, how is this going to turn out? Because it's bone on bone. How can LDN help with that? And she was virtually pain free. It was just an amazing story, and she felt, she could drive again, she could walk again, she could, do everything that she needed to do without being in, terrible chronic pain, which is very good, very
Yeah,
good.
that
And
really.
yeah, and the other nice thing, if we're going to talk about pain, is how LDN or microdosing of LDN can be used alongside of opioids. Now, I
Mhm.
found that absolutely fascinating. Um, Dr. Samyadev Datta, who's one of our medical advisors, he was saying that when he's called into a hospital because a patient is, screaming out in pain, he can often find that they're taking a cocktail of really strong opioid painkillers. And the first thing he does is takes them off half of them because, there's painkiller overload.
Yeah.
And by using microdosing of, say, 0.001, which I mean is obviously so small, it'd be a job to see it, I would imagine. That then makes the opioids more effective. So they're starting to get pain relief, because people, once they start on opioids, have to keep taking more and more to get the same effect. And then when you've got the maximum dose and it's still not working, then you have this cocktail, and it's awful. And for people to then start to get benefits of the opioids, so the opioids can be titrated down and
Hmm.
the microdosing titrated up, and to get these people off of the opioids, because I mean, it's awful to say that they're addicts. They are addicts, but not through any fault of their own. They're addicts through prescription medications, because years ago, um, drug companies said that opioids were not addictive,
Yeah.
which
Yeah.
is absolutely, totally wrong.
Hmm.
So we have this problem not just in America and England, but it's a worldwide problem of getting people off the opioids. But LDN seems to be a very good tool to get people off of the opioids without going through withdrawal. And that is the hope for every prescriber who's got patients on
Yeah.
opioids, isn't it?
Definitely, and I find that a lot of the pain prescribers in our area is very open to LDN. Of course, a lot of the doctors are cautious, and patients themselves, they don't want to feel any sort of withdrawal effect, so they are a little bit cautious. We have not yet had a patient start that, but that definitely is something that I like to let providers know that is an option. And a lot of them are definitely very interested
Mm.
in learning about that. And I definitely think it's very amazing, kind of the science behind how LDN works and the receptors and getting them sensitized again. It's really unique how our, like the perception of medicine has changed and how things work in the body and how it's just evolved. Because when I was in school too, I loved mechanisms. So the way drugs work in the body, that was what lit me up.
Oh, that's fantastic. And yes, patients are very cautious because the last thing they want to do is to make their pain worse or to go into withdrawal. But with education and understanding where they realize that they're not going to stop the opioids, it's just a case of titrating it very, very slowly so that they don't go into withdrawal. Obviously, it takes time. You can't do it overnight, but if they can see that there's light at the end of the tunnel, and then because you explain to people what do high doses of opioids do to the body?
Yeah, your body starts to build a tolerance that they expect that high dose. That the receptors themselves, they change. So you become dependent in a way that your body expects to see that those opioids starts to say in a certain way. And I remember too learning in pharmacy school that the really high doses of opioids, it's called hyperanalgesic, I think, symptom, where they make patients feel more pain, the really high doses of opioids. So it's kind of like almost a vicious cycle at a certain point.
And what does it do to your other organs?
Oh, with our other organs, with our GI tract, causing constipation, and that can cause, a whole array of other downstream GI effects. There's a risk of respiratory depression, it slowing down the drive in our brain to breathe. Of course, we have drowsiness and just dizziness in terms of just, the short-term little side effects.
Yeah, it's not good news, is it?
No, they have a lot. They can be powerful drugs. They are definitely powerful and should be kept away from children and pets, and caution. But they're probably not the best thing. Well, as we do know, they're not the best thing long term for chronic pain.
Exactly.
Something like LDN would be much better. Or, like we were talking about, the really small doses of LDN, the micro doses combined with an opioid to kind of sensitize the person's receptors to have a better response to the current doses that they're on, rather than always increasing and increasing and increasing, and then that tolerance and that vicious cycle of the pain actually becoming worse again. Because at a certain point, your body adapts to that level of opioids. So kind of getting at that cycle, LDN, I think, is a wonderful option for all patients suffering from pain, chronic pain.
But I think in the ER, opioids have their place when people are in, they've been in an accident and they're in a lot of pain. I'm not saying we should ban it. It has its place, but for short-term use only, not to go on for months or years. I mean, I've spoken to people who've been hooked on them for 20 years.
Yeah.
Not good.
Yeah.
Well, Maria, thank you so much for having joined us today. And if you would like to give people your website address to find you, what is it, please?
Yeah, so our website is rx3pharmacy.com.
So thank you very much for having joined us today.
Yeah, thank you.
Any questions or comments you may have, please email me, Linda, Linda, at ldnrt.org. I look forward to hearing from you. Thank you for joining us today. We really appreciated your company. Until next time, stay safe and keep well.